Hey YouTube, in my last video we're discussing variables in a statistical sense, and recall that variables are any things that you could basically collect data for that are, have changing values. So if I were to collect data based upon, say temperature or time, or we could say, number of vehicles owned by a typical family if I was doing some type of study, or we could say blood pressure, okay? Or we could say, like, if I had like a rating from 1 to 5, okay, and we say 1 to 5 on a scale or something like that, these would be all examples of variables. And as a matter of fact, these are all what we call quantitative variables. So when we talk about variables in the first place, I'm going to draw a little diagram over here, and then we'll talk about the difference between discrete and continuous variables. But the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of point this out. We say that this is qualitative data on the left, and this is non-numerical, okay? When we talk about qualitative data, which is none of these things on the left here, these are all things we could collect data for and have a number for, but qualitative data are things like color or mood or sound or something like that. Like, I guess, I don't know, we could measure sound, but essentially things that you can't assign a number to. The other possibility is that it is quantitative. No, I didn't spell that right. Quantitative. And this is numerical data. The interesting thing with numerical data is that we often take this a step further and we refer to these things as either being discrete or continuous. Okay, so I want to kind of make the distinction between discrete and continuous variables, but we say discrete things, they have gaps, okay, in their data set measurement scheme, okay, and we say continuous things have no gaps. Another way to look at this is, I don't want to say you can't have a decimal of a discrete thing, but usually no decimals. Usually I'll put a little asterisk next to that. No decimal values. Usually like a whole number value. Whereas we say things that are continuous have decimals. Okay, have decimals, and they can have decimals. So what I want to do is this. I want to look back over here on the left and say, well, which of these would be considered to be discrete and which of these would be considered to be continuous? So as far as discrete goes, we say have gaps. What I really mean is this. Excuse me. These are things that have no decimal. So when I look at these, I say number of vehicles owned. This kind of strikes me as being a discrete thing. And the reason why is because I can have 1 vehicle or 2 vehicles or 3 vehicles, but I'm never going to have like 3.78 vehicles. Okay, so in terms of examples, we could say that the number of vehicles owned would be an example of a discrete variable type, because I can't have a fraction of a vehicle. Okay, or this rating scale from 1 to 5. You either give it a 1, a 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, but you never give it a 1.7. So we say a rating from 1 to 5. Okay, this would be considered to be discrete. Now, everything else over here, by elimination, I'll tell you this, would be something that is continuous, but continuous because you can have a decimal of it. That is temperature. Temperature is something that you can have definitely a decimal of. It can be 38.28 degrees outside, but technically it could be 38.282828145667. You can always measure down to be more and more and more accurate with that thing. So temperature is an example of that. We could say time. Time is a measure of something that is continuous because you can have a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second, and that makes sense. Okay, or blood pressure. Blood pressure, usually if you work in the medical field, of course, you know that you round off the blood pressure probably to the nearest whole number, which would make you think that maybe this is discrete. But blood pressure, technically, we could, if we could be really, really, really accurate, give it a very, very long decimal. So the difference between discrete and continuous variable types within the quantitative field of data is that discrete things, you have gaps in it, and continuous things, you don't have gaps. You can measure with the decimal. Cheers.